of the Bulwark are here. I'm so happy that you guys are here. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hey,
we got
Don, I'm pumped.
2/3 of the Next Level podcast right now.
Wait,
You're
what
crushing
happened
on YouTube, Don. I've been, it's happening. It's like a rocket ship to the moon. I've been
You
watching.
think so?
I think so.
I'm enjoying building the community, and I'm enjoying watching it grow. I'm sure you guys have lots of advice for me, and I will take it. Trust me, I will take it. But can we talk about what's going on as we're taping this right now? Because effectively, Donald Trump's lawyers are arguing that Joe Biden can effectively order the military to assassinate him, and then he won't have, I guess, any way to combat it. It is an odd thing that's happening.
Boy, when you frame it that way, the argument's starting to sound a little bit better than it did when I read it on paper.
Sonia Sotomayor said, if the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military to assassinate him, is that within his official acts to which he has immunity? And then the lawyer says that could well be an official act.
Yeah,
what is going on?
Yeah, so this makes sense if you think about it in this context. The people around Trump have no shame. And so this lawyer right now is humiliating himself and any sort of level of legal standards in order to help Trump do the central thing, which is not really to get immunity, because I don't think there's anybody who seriously thinks that the Supreme Court is going to actually give presidents total immunity, not from civil liability, which is different, but from criminal liability. So they could just like murder opponents and there would be no laws to hold them accountable. The thing that Trump is actually trying to do here is delay to the point where this case can't go forward before the election. And I think he's probably been successful in that. And so this is kind of a show right now where the real goal is just to make sure that Trump wasn't going to get convicted before the election.
Well, I mean, these lawyers are humiliating themselves, Tim. I mean, they're going to have a career beyond Trump.
I mean, get in line behind people who have humiliated themselves from Donald Trump. And some of them ended up turning out okay. Sarah Sanders is the governor of Arkansas right now. Others of them not as okay. I think Rudy's probably just kind of drinking somewhere in a corner bar, if cheaper scotch than he used to because of the lawsuits. But I think that they'll be able to get jobs. I mean, people have had to make audacious, absurd arguments in front of the Supreme Court for clients before. Is this the stupidest one that's ever been made? I don't know. We'd have to bring on our other colleague George Conway or somebody to talk to us with a little bit more history. But I got to tell you, my interest is starting to get piqued. When I first read it, I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, that a president could assassinate someone and that you would make this argument in front of distinguished jurists like Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor and John Roberts. But now that the way you framed it, Don, that Joe Biden could assassinate Trump and that would be legal.
Yeah.
That's just something to mull. I'm just saying all of a sudden I'm starting to mull it. I think maybe John Sauer should explore that a little bit more.
Well, I mean, did they think about the consequences of what they're saying that any president could order? If Donald Trump does not become president and Joe Biden becomes president, you say, look, he's a political rival and whatever, and get rid of him. I know George Conway's not here, but what does this mean for what if the Supreme Court actually says Donald Trump is immune? What happens to all of these cases that we are watching with such interest in the country?
They're not going to. This is what's happening. This is what I think. Sarah, I'm interested in your take. This is, I think, a non-legal expert take, but a human take, and a take from someone that has watched the human condition of conservatives and Republicans try to deal with the Trump years. I think what's happening is that most of these guys, Thomas, Alito, maybe some of the Trump endorsees, ACB and Gorsuch in particular, they don't want to have to deal with this. They want to be quasi-helpful to Trump, particularly Thomas and Alito. The delaying is quasi-helpful to Trump. And then they want the cover of being able to rule on this and say, no, we ruled the right way. We're not toadies. We're serious jurists. We're responsible. And they can kind of have their cake and eat it too a little bit by helping with the delay element of this while publicly coming down on this right side. We'll see if that happens. I've been wrong before, but that's kind of what I expect is happening here.
Yeah, and I do think it's important. We are not lawyers, which is why we have a whole show with George Conway where he explains the legal news to us, because we're not. But I mean, look, the most that could happen I think potentially is that they do some like a little bit of a carve out potentially. But like that gives there some immunity maybe in some particular cases that still would not be blanket immunity from any criminality. Like, and listening to the conversation with the court right now, you can just see why. There's like a million instances in which this would create an absolutely chaotic system for us in which we would have a dictator and the rule of law would mean nothing. And so just nobody's going to do that. That I think that part's going to be okay. The courts have mostly been they have mostly done the right thing once they've been pushed to the edge. But I agree with Tim that they are helping him with his delay tactics. So is what's her name down in Florida, Eileen Cannon. And this has allowed Trump now to get this far. But that's why he's so mad right now in the New York case with Bragg, because they actually got him in a courtroom, right? Yeah. They threw out all of the attempts to delay it past this. And so now he's actually got to sit through a trial. But in these other cases, they are very unlikely now to see a courtroom before the election.
So let's talk about the actual court case that's happening now down in Manhattan. We had so much going on in Manhattan this week. You know, you had the protests on campus. You had Trump's court case. And then, of course, we had, I'm sure you were paying close attention to this, Tim. You had the Knicks. Did you watch that game?
It was unbelievable. Oh, yeah, I was watching it. I was waiting for the Nuggets to come in. And they were down 5. They scored 6 points in like 12 seconds.
Crazy. Just because you're down, it doesn't mean you're out. You know what I mean?
I thought you guys were going to say, I did not think you guys were going to talk about the Knicks. I thought you were going to talk about Harvey Weinstein's conviction getting overturned.
I woke up to that bit of news. We're going off topic here, but it's crazy. He's going to get another trial in Manhattan, right?
Yeah. Highest court in New York, they overturned it.
What's going on there?
I don't know what I think. I mean, I think it's terrible. I mean, I mean, I don't think there was any doubt after the last trial that he was guilty. So the fact that they are giving him a new trial seems insane, but they are.
Rich people.
It's funny, the pictures of him now, he's clearly, I don't know if he looks like awful. Like his eye is now drooping and he's walking with one of those push walkers. And I can't tell how much of an act that is versus like real.
Was there Ozempic in jail? I wonder if he had access to Ozempic.
I don't know.
Where is this conversation going? Okay,
Sorry.
We'll follow
Off the
that
rails.
new trial when it happens. But I was shocked when they said it has been, I think the ruling was overturned, right? And then he's going to get a new trial. Okay, let's talk about, I want to talk about, because Donald Trump has Pecker problems, right? And I'm talking about David Pecker. Because David Pecker came on the scene on Monday after opening statements, and he was the first witness. And he really laid out the case, especially the timeline for when this all happened. David Pecker did not come on the scene, did not get into the picture until Donald Trump threw his hat into the ring. And they, all these stories started to come out. And they said, we got to catch and kill these stories. And we also going to have to spread some negative stories about your opponents. And he was all in for it. How damaging do you think so far, Sarah or Tim, that David Pecker has been for Donald Trump?
Go ahead, Timmy.
Well, substantively, it's bad. There's always these questions with Trump. When you ask a question like that, how damaging is it? Well, how damaging is it in this court case? How damaging is it politically, right? How damaging is it to his credibility? And I think it's like different for different questions. Trump isn't even arguing the facts of his court case. Like his defense is incoherent in the court case. It's like, well, I didn't do it, but if I did do it, it was legal.
Like
I mean,
OJ,
it's like
if I did it, right?
If I did it, and so how much did it damage that? And I think it was pretty clear that there was some political intent here, and if that's part of the underlying issue that Donald Trump's trying to prove that, I was just trying to hide the stuff from Melania. Well, it's pretty clear that there was political intent here, not just on the catch and kill, but on the other elements of his work with David Pecker. One thing that our friends at Republican Voters Against Trump had put out recently is that he lied about this. I know it's not breaking news that Donald Trump lied, but he said explicitly in 2016, back when I was working for Jeb, and then for an anti-Trump super PAC after Jeb dropped out, that he wasn't working with the Inquirer, that this wasn't him when the Inquirer was advancing those stories about Ted Cruz's dad killing Kennedy and Ted Cruz having affairs with 5 women and Marco Rubio having a love child and all this other stuff. And these stories revealed to us something that we kind of knew but didn't really know for sure. It was like a hand in glove operation. I mean, Michael Cohen was editing the stories. They were brainstorming ideas. They were obviously taking money to kill stories that were going to be negative against Donald Trump. And then, while the National Enquirer might not be serious, they did break the John Edwards story.
That's
You
true.
know, so it's not nothing, right? Like had it been the other way, where the National Enquirer had broken the story about Donald Trump and Stormy, might that have had a political impact on him? Certainly possible. So I think in that sense, this is all damaging. Isn't that damaging to him politically? Probably not. But I think in the courtroom and on the credibility in the inside game, like it's a pretty damaging testimony.
I got to tell you, I remember trying to do research back in the day when that happened, whether or not Ben Carson actually left a sponge in someone's head while doing surgery, and could find no
What'd you
evidence of
find?
it. But I didn't find any evidence of it, but a lot of people did believe it.
Right.
So, point well taken there, Tim. What do you think, Sarah?
Well, I think the main thing, we talked about this on TNL. I don't think that we in politics were like up for the challenge of Trump and his tabloid candidacy of 2016, right? I think we were pretty dismissive of the Inquirer stories because we were like, Ted Cruz is not sleeping with 5 people. Like 5 women will not sleep with Ted Cruz. Like these are not real stories. But I think that we underestimated how much Trump was able to pump into the bloodstream. I also think we were underestimating sort of his celebrity, how much of the circus people found funny, how much when things that would have damaged normal politicians like the Access Hollywood tape didn't even lay a glove on him because of the celebrity, because he was always tawdry, because he was always living in the tabloids. And I think we just overestimated this, not the sophistication, but the level of at which voters would sort of either dismiss that stuff or like the negative stuff, the more and versus how much it actually brought an entirely new group of people into the political system who were there for the circus and the grossness and the tabloid elements of it. And he ran circles around us on that front ultimately. Yeah. And in retrospect, you can look back and say, and now, because now he does it with Fox News. Right now, you look at January 6th, it's like he graduated. What he was doing with the Inquirer, he had developed a skill of dictating to media companies coverage and how they did things. Like when you see the texting around January 6th, the way Laura Ingraham and what's his name, howling
Hannity,
content.
Eric Bolling,
Hannity.
Jesse Waters.
These guys were advisors to Trump. They were in constant communication with him and his family. And so this is how Trump's always operated. And it is not normally how politicians operate.
Well, can you imagine? I would say, can you imagine if they found someone, a CNN or an MSNBC, doing that with, a Democrat?
John, you weren't texting with Obama, giving him advice, taking feedback. You weren't letting him edit your monologues. He was messaging you with some feedback on your monologue
every single day. I was texting Obama and also Joe Biden. I mean, come on, are you kidding me? I don't. They would not do that. But those are the times that we're in. So we couldn't figure out. I think you're right. We had a tough time in the media. Well, you said politically, you guys had a tough time doing. Those of you who are in politics, but the media had a tough time combating it as well. I'm wondering though, Tim, how do you expect Trump's team to counter Pecker's testimony? Because I actually do think it's damaging because he was close to him. And I thought his testimony was actually, it was pretty good.
To me, I think it's so damaging that they're going to try to ignore it. And in court, they're going to have to, again, make arguments about how, this was, part of his celebrity. He did these, other people do these catch and kill things. It wasn't really about politics. Because that's the underlying core question, right? Like there's the illegal bookkeeping, but for it to be a felony, it has to be in service of another law, which has to be breaking campaign finance law. So I think that's the legal argument. Politically, to me, I think these guys are champing at the bit to get Cohen up there. Like they want to have they want to have someone testifying against him that is much easier to attack, that goes right into the Trump wheelhouse of, as soon as Michael Cohen or someone else that has other vulnerabilities goes up on the stand, Trump's going to start bleeding crazy bleats about all the crazy things that he knows about Michael Cohen and how he's an idiot, and he's going to demean him. And
he's already done that.
Yeah, and so I think that goes to 11, though. I mean, I think they just really try to kind of focus on making, taking the credibility away from other folks. I don't think they're going to talk about the Pecker thing that much. I think they're hoping we're going to move on. That's always part of the Trump play with the media, right? It's like if something's bad for him, hope it moves on and draw attention to something else.
Well, I mean, and probably the same thing in the courtroom. They have him up there early, and the Trump folks are probably hoping, okay, maybe the jury won't remember that. But I had attorneys on yesterday, and they said they're going to put Michael Cohen, I think, in the middle because of his credibility, and they're hoping that if it's awful, right? That the jury will have time to forget about it, and they'll put like a Stormy Daniels on at the end just to
Yeah.
seal the deal. Do you agree with that, Sarah?
I guess. I mean, I'm not an
Sarah,
expert in
not George Conway.
Yeah, I'm just not an expert in legal strategy. I will say I'm going to make a broader macro political point that I've been thinking about, which is, obviously Trump is really he's Teflon on sort of nobody thinks of him as a sexually moral character, right? And so he gets away with things that are baked in a way that no other politician could. I've been doing focus groups with women though around the abortion issue. And one of the things that the court case is doing, this sort of goes to the question of like, does it hurt him? I think it hurts him in court. Like, I think Trump could very easily be convicted in this case, and like that's going to matter. But what it's doing at a macro level, this case in particular, is just reminding people of what a scumbag Trump is toward women. And I will say, I think that matters not that much, except the abortion issue now creates a policy tie-in to a guy who is super gross to women and dismissive of like, their ability to exist, to make choices for themselves. Like there is something about it with women right now that you're hearing in these groups, people who voted for him, who will not vote for him again because of abortion. But this case is sort of creating more salience generally around how he treats women. And so the point I've been sort of trying to find a way to is that I think it didn't matter how he sort of thought about women, locker room talk, whatever. But now that there's a policy implication for women, I actually think it's creating a little more seriousness than it has in the past.
Sarah, let me ask you, what about the E. Jean Carroll of it all? That you think the policy, the abortion thing, is much bigger than him being found liable for sexual assault?
Well, one of the things that I always try to argue whenever we're having a political conversation, there's always a thing about like, will this one thing make a difference? Mm-hmm. And the answer is usually no, that one thing won't.
We found out with grab him by the pee. So go.
Yeah, right. However, the question is like, does something in its aggregate, does something with a specific combination? So like, just give you an example. In 2022, people think like, well, was abortion that allowed all of Trump's handpicked candidates to go down in 2022 and for Democrats to win? Was it democracy? Was it the election denialism? Or was it suddenly a combination of extreme candidates who had extreme positions on abortions, who were election deniers, who were tied to Trump, and like that created just a general picture of extremism that allowed a big slice of Republicans to vote for Democrats instead? It's an all of the above thing, right? It's not just one thing. And I think that the E. Jean Carroll plus the Stormy Daniels thing being revisited at a time when people are thinking about abortion as a high salience issue and thinking about how is Trump going to handle abortion, I think that is creating a different like macro environment altogether.
Is it close enough to the time of the election though? Because it's still 6 months. I mean, it'll be 5 or so odd months until the election, probably, when this gets decided. And 5 months, it's a long time.
It is a long time. It's an eternity.
Fade out of people's minds.
And, I don't know. Well, look, the abortion thing's not going to go away. Right. And if again, a conviction is still a conviction. He's
pivoting on abortion, though, Tim. He's trying to have.
But the Arizona's really screwed him on that. The timing was horrible, right? And he's like, we're going to go to states' rights, and then the next day, one of the key states he needs to win is like, okay, our states' right says we're going to go back to the 1864 law that was put in place by a pedophile before women could vote. And now even if you get raped, you can't get an abortion after 1 week, right? So I think he really kind of put himself in a bad box on that. So, and the Democrats will be able to run a campaign on this. None of this happens in a vacuum, right? If he gets convicted for this, obviously that then is in ads. That's something that's talked about at the convention. So I don't know. I think Sarah's point that's interesting is there's one group that doesn't get talked about a lot, which is working class, non-college women. And, Trump brought in a lot of, we always think about the Obama-Trump voter. You always think about this person. It's like you imagine in your head like a working class guy in a hard hat who's a union guy that used to be a Democrat that now went for Trump and like that in Ohio or something. That's your stereotype. But there are a lot of women that fit that bill. They weren't particularly religious. Voters. They were kind of smaller town, ex-urban, women, working class. And, Trump, for whatever reason, resonated with that community that had been traditionally Democratic voters. If Democrats can claw some percentage of those women back using this combination that Sarah just laid out, with abortion as an issue that is something that maybe some of them have experience with or have kids, that they're concerned about, having access to care. boy, I think that potentially, that it could be a demographic that this stuff could really resonate with.
And can I just add,
Sure.
on the focus group podcast that's coming out this weekend, we talked to a bunch of Arizona women, both Trump voters and swing voters. And in the group of women who had voted for Trump in the past, but who were leaning away from him now, 3 of them had had abortions, and one of them had like a catastrophic health event with a pregnancy.
Wow.
And so there was, and it's going to be, it's a really intense emotional episode, because when the first woman talks about her abortion at a very young age after her partner had walked out on her, 2 other women say, like, I experienced a very similar thing. And so, like, I think that there's an underestimation, and like that wasn't making them, they are Republicans. They are real, and they do not want to vote for Joe Biden, but they didn't want to vote for Trump again. They were like Kennedy curious. And so this is where I think and these were a lot of the exact types of women that Tim is talking about. And so I think that's hard it's hard for people to realize how personal this can be for people.
Yeah, recently I got married, and I had my family come up from Louisiana, and then my husband's family is from Southampton. So it's sort of two.
We saw the pics.
Yeah,
we saw the pics. It looked great.
Ethnic groups come together, and rarely do we talk about politics. But my family, mostly women. I'm like the only boy in the family, except for my great nephew now. But they were talking about that issue where they think it's just women who, don't want children, or they get pregnant accidentally. And it's so much more involved in that. And it was just interesting for me to listen to the conversations from those women, because men don't really know about those things, right? I mean, we should be allies for women, but I think we should basically stay out of the conversation and just be allies. But Sarah, I think you're right. It's much more than just, you shouldn't be having a baby and it's against, God's rules. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think, look, these women were all talking about this. They were saying, look, I'm pro-life, but I believe in a woman's right to choose. And I hear that line so often. The first time I heard it, I remember I sort of laughed. I was like, well, this is incompatible, but it's not. It is replete. It is the way so many people talk, and they talk about having a reverence for life, about celebrating life, about how important life is. But that also includes to them the life of the mother, and that they think people, have to make really hard choices. And I just think oftentimes, and it's one of the things that's always interesting to me is how different the conversations are when we convene a group to talk. It's not my first time doing a group of women talking about abortion. Abortion comes up. We talk about abortion in most of the groups. Most of the groups are mixed. When you have a group of all women, the way the conversation goes is really different.
They can be more personal and honest, right?
They do. They will just they will talk, they will support each other. And it will remind you that this is one of those issues that like isn't as top of mind, even for anybody. If you ask them just like, how do you think things are going in the country? They're going to talk about immigration. They're going to talk about crime. They're going to talk about the economy and inflation. But if you talk to them about abortion, or if abortion comes up, the depth of that issue for people, for women especially, who it's either affected them personally, or they have friends who've had health complications, or any number of things that they do not feel comfortable. The other thing, they do not feel comfortable telling somebody else how to live on this issue. The other thing that I thought was super interesting, and it tied in with a lot of them being Kennedy curious, is they were taking some of these were pretty Trumpy women, and I use Trumpy as a descriptor, not just how they vote. They saw Kennedy's anti-vax position as like consistent with their let people live how they want to live on abortion, because this was about bodily autonomy. It was about not telling people what they had to do with their bodies, which I thought was like a very interesting way to look at it.
Wow.
This is kind of how things are like when Don and I are just in a group of gay men. We start to talk different, slang comes up, RuPaul references, no Knicks, we don't mention the Knicks, we're in a mixed group, lesbians here. So we feel like we had to mention basketball.
This is how it always goes. Like the boys do their thing and there's just like a lesbian just over here. It's fine.
You guys are nuts. Sarah, I would love for you to come back after that airs. Would you come back and talk to us about it? Because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Real quickly, just before we go here, I want to ask you guys about the media coverage, right? Because as you know, Donald Trump, every time he leaves the courtroom, well, most of the time, I can't say every time, he gets in front of the cameras. It's the most cameras I think he'll have on him until the convention, or unless and until he wins, right? So he's going to shape this in his favor. Do you see him using this? I believe he's going to shape it in his favor. he keeps saying, I'm not on the campaign trail, but yet he is on the campaign trail in front of the cameras. Make sense for me, Tim.
I don't. Did you say Sarah, Tim? I don't know. I'm
He
just
said
going to
Tim.
go. Yeah, okay, I'm just going to go because I'm the boy, and that's how we do. We interrupt. After all that lady talk, it's like anyway. Just joking.
Send Tim mean emails.
Don't send me mean emails about how I interrupt Sarah. I don't think it's going to help him. I don't get it. I think a lot of people are triggered by Trump. It's like everything works for him. It's Teflon. It's not really true. He lost in 2018, lost in 2020. He shocked everybody. He shocked me in 2016. There's certain things he can get away with that other people can't get away with. I agree with all that. But a lot of this stuff hasn't worked for him. He's lost a lot of voters since 2016 and since 2020. And it's just, look, having done campaigns, I can tell you, you'd rather your candidate not be in court all day, sitting there, being told to sit down by the judge. Like, there are a lot of other things he could be doing. There's an economy of time. He could be out there campaigning. He could be doing message events. He could be, contrasting himself with Joe Biden. He could be using the money that's going on lawyers to be on paid targeted advertising on offices. Joe Biden's running circles around him on all that. So it doesn't mean that he's definitely going to lose or whatever, but I reject the notion that this is helping him. Sure, there might be certain times where having all those cameras there, he can create a news story that's good for him for recycle or whatever. But on balance, I think that it's harming him for sure.
Yeah, and can I just add to that? There's part of the reason that we get in this mode of like this helps him is because we were just spent a long time in a primary where everything did help him. Right. So with his consolidating his base, the legal troubles helped him absolutely consolidate his base of voters and make him feel under attack and like highlight the shared grievances. Not that these people actually, Trump is good at making people sort of feel his grievance on his behalf and tethering it to them. That is different in a general election. The sort of right-leaning independents, soft GOP voters, a lot of these swing voters, independents, like, they don't love the look of him in court. They don't like the idea of voting for a convicted felon. And so I think that you just have to remember that we're back in general election territory, and it doesn't work as well with some of those voters.
Well, I appreciate you both joining us. Joining me, I should say, joining us here on the Don
you too.
Show.
We didn't plan this white look? I think I was thinking maybe Hampton's white party vibe. Maybe we're going to get invited, but we are kind of all matchy a little bit. You might be in a cream, Don. I don't know.
I thought you were being racist there for a minute, but
no. I mean our shirts, Don. Our shirts.
I know. We've gone from gay to Weinstein to all kinds of crazy stuff. You guys, I watch the Bulwark all the time. I love what you do, and I appreciate you joining us here on the Don Lemon Show. And any advice that you could give me, as I am just starting this, I would appreciate it.
You're killing
more
it.
Is
Thanks
more,
for having
Don.
us.
More is more.
More is more. Thank you, guys. Be well. I'll see you soon. Okay.
See ya.
Bye.